Superior Court of the State of California, County of Orange, Department C1 is now in session. Judge Knox presiding. Please be seated and come to order. Please turn off all cell phones and refrain from talking.
Good morning and welcome to the championship rounds of the 2018 Constitutional Rights Foundation mock trial competition. I want to congratulate both teams for being this far in the competition. As far as I'm concerned, you're all winners, and whatever happens in this round, you should be very proud of your accomplishment, making it this far. So before we get started, we have a very distinguished panel of scorekeepers, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves. Start in the back row with Mr. Cook.
Good morning. I'm Dan Cook. I'm with the Public Defender's Office here in Orange County.
Hi, I'm Nikki Miliband. I'm with Good Wildman. I'm president of the Orange County Bar.
Good morning. I'm Randy Sherman, a judge of the Superior Court here in Orange County.
Good morning. I'm Donald Gaffney, judge here in Orange County.
Good morning. Linda Miller, Orange County Superior Court retired, currently sitting on assignment.
Good morning, David Outwater, local trial attorney, member of the board of the Constitutional Rights Foundation.
All right, good morning. Nancy Zeltzer, I'm a judge, Orange County Superior Court.
And good morning, Megan Wagner, Orange County Superior Court judge.
Thank you all for serving as scorekeepers. I know it's Saturday morning, and some of us were up late last night, but we're all here bright and early because you've all done so much work to prepare for this event. So before we get started, I would ask that the teams introduce themselves to help myself and the attorney scores. So, prosecution team.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor. Volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Ashton Cho, CHO, pretrial on behalf of prosecution. At this time, may my co-counsel please introduce themselves.
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor. Volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Hannah Kim, K-I-M, and today I will be presenting the opening statement on behalf of the people. I will also be conducting the direct examination of Dr. Dakota Chung and the cross-examination of Dr. Blake Williams.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Julia Wemori, U-Y-E-M-O-R-I, and today I will be conducting the direct examinations of Officer Keegan Lopez and Cameron Holmes, as well as the cross-examinations of Marlo, Patterson and Reagan, Klein.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Charity Kim, K-I-M, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Sawyer Smith, as well as the cross-examination of Sam Kloss. I will also be presenting the closing argument. At this time, may our witnesses please introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Kana Costin, C-O-S-S-I-N, and today I am Officer Keegan Lopez.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Raina Lee, L-E-E, and today I am Sawyer Smith.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Haley Park, P-A-R-K, and today I am Cameron Holmes.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Isaac Kim, K-I-M, and today I am Dr. Dakota Chung. At this time, may our court clerk please introduce himself?
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers. My name is Timothy Sutt, and today I am the court clerk. For when there are 2 minutes left and for when there is 1 minute left, I'll be providing visual signs. For when there are 30 seconds left and for when time runs out, I'll be providing both visual signs and verbal warnings. At this time, may our attorney coach and teacher coach please introduce themselves.
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor, volunteers, Christian Ferreira. Good morning, Your Honor, volunteer scorekeepers, Justin Fox.
Good morning. Defense team.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Brooke Donovan, and today I will be presenting the pretrial argument on behalf of our client, Reagan Klein. At this time, our trial attorneys will introduce themselves.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Tobias Grafensteiner, trial counsel on behalf of our client, Reagan Klein. Today, I will be conducting the direct examination of Marlo Patterson, the cross-examination of Sawyer Smith. I will also be presenting the closing argument.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Rachel Swingler, trial counsel on behalf of our client, Reagan Klein. Today, I will be conducting direct examinations of Reagan Klein and Dr. Blake Williams and conducting the cross-examination of Dr. Dakota Chung. I I will also be presenting the opening statement.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Mark Antonio Murillo, trial counsel on behalf of our client, Reagan Klein. Today, I will be conducting the direct examination of Sam Kloss and the cross-examinations of Officer Reagan, Lopez, and Cameron Holmes. At this time, our witnesses will now introduce themselves.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Grace Davenport, and today I will be portraying the role of Dr. Blake Williams.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Heather Velasquez, and today I'll be portraying the role of Sam Kloss.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Caleb Jones, and today I will be portraying the role of Marlo, Patterson.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Maya Siebold, and today I will be portraying the role of Reagan Klein. At this time, our bailiff will now introduce herself.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Haley Teixeira, and today I will be portraying the role, today I'll be assisting the court as bailiff. At this time, our unofficial clerk will introduce himself.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Kevin Wong, and today I'll be assisting the court as shadow clerk. At this time, may our coaches please introduce themselves?
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kelsey Munch, student coach.
Good morning, Your Honor. Camilla Wright, student coach.
Good morning, Your Honor. Riley Anderson, student coach.
Good morning, Your Honor. Alexandria Hurst, student coach.
Good morning, Your Honor. Matthew Cox, attorney coach. Good morning, Your Honor. Aaron Heisler, attorney coach.
Good morning, Your Honor. Amy Sideruk, teacher coach.
Good morning. So I have some instructions I will read before we get started. You must complete your presentations within the specified time limits. The clerk will signal you as your time for each section of the presentation begins to run out. When your total time for each section runs out, you will be stopped. Even if you have not finished, attorneys must call for witnesses. This is a bench trial. Attorneys and witnesses may not verbally address the scoring attorneys and judges as if they were a jury. However, eye contact is permissible. At the end of the trial, I will render a verdict of guilty or not guilty in relation to the charges brought. The teams will be rated based on the quality of their presentation, independent of my verdict. Barring unforeseen circumstances, no recesses will be called. If for any reason a recess is necessary, team members should remain in their appropriate places and should have no contact with spectators or coaches. Remember that objections are limited to the California Mock Trial Simplified Rules of Evidence located in the case packet. And if there are no questions, we'll begin with the pretrial arguments. Both sides.
Excuse me, Mr. Knox, one of our
scores doesn't have.
Forgive me for my tardiness, Your Honor. I don't have
All right, I didn't realize, and maybe you should introduce yourself since we had all the other scores introduce themselves.
My name is Denise Carter. I'm with JAM, so I'm an example of an attorney who doesn't practice law anymore. Please forgive my untimeliness. Thank you for letting me be here as scorekeeper. I don't have the two rosters for the teams, so if someone would be able to bring them up there.
All right, does anyone have a roster for each team?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. So for the pretrial motion, both sides will have 4 minutes to present their arguments. The defense will begin first. I will interrupt to ask clarifying questions. Time spent answering my questions is not included in the 4-minute time limit. At the conclusion of your arguments, each side will be offered 2 minutes of rebuttal time. Remember that the rebuttal time is to be used to counter your opponent's arguments. It cannot be used to raise new issues. Is counsel for the defense ready to begin?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, if you would please summarize your arguments.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Your Honor, the defense respectfully requests that the 995 motion be granted and count 2 of criminal threat be dropped. We are here this morning because a friendship that once was had come to an end. My client Reagan Klein and Sawyer Smith had grown apart, and Sawyer Smith's potential rise to fame caused him to drop my client as a friend. Understandably, Klein was upset, and in an unfortunate lapse of judgment, commented on one of Sawyer Smith's posts, paraphrasing, Your Honor, saying, "You deserve to die." However, there was no probable cause to show that my client's statement can constitute a criminal threat.
Well, wouldn't a reasonable person hearing those words consider that a true threat?
No, Your Honor, because they lack enough specificity to say when, where, or how my client is going to execute their putative threat.
All right, go ahead, continue.
According to California Penal Code 422, for a threat to constitute a criminal threat, it must be unequivocal, unconditional, immediate, and specific. Secondly, it must also have a gravity of purpose and immediacy of execution. And lastly, the person receiving the threat must be in reasonable sustained fear. And Your Honor, all of these elements are absent in our case. My client's statement lacks enough specificity on its surface to constitute it as a criminal threat. We can look to the analogous case of In re George
Didn't
T.
your client say, "I'm coming for you"? Isn't that a specific threat? You deserve to die and I'm coming for you?
No, Your Honor, because they didn't say when, how, or where they're going to execute it. In the case of DC versus RR, it was also ruled that grotesque and exaggerated languages, statements such as burn in hell and pound your head in with an ice pick and rip your heart out, were considered to be specific enough, whereas in our case, my client's statement lacks enough specificity.
All right, go ahead, continue.
In the analogous case of In re George T., the state Supreme Court ruled that the defendant's statements lacked enough specificity. In this case, the defendant was prosecuted because they handed out dark poetry to fellow students, consisting of statements such as, "For I can be the next kid to bring guns to kill students at school."
But isn't this distinguishable from George T? He's writing poems in school, and your client is making threats on the internet to a specific person. So doesn't George T hold something that's different than what's the fact pattern in this case?
Your Honor, the ruling in George T. was ruled if it was specific enough. They talked about the specificity in that case. In that case, the defendant still wanted harm to come to the victims that they wanted to. Therefore, they discussed the fact that it was a true threat or not.
All right, go ahead, you can continue.
In this case, the defendant was prosecuted because they handed out dark poetry, with statements consisting of, "Probably I will be the next high school killer." And Your Honor, those comments are more specific than the comment made by my client. And because those comments were considered constitutionally protected free speech, then my client's statement should also fall under that ruling. Secondly, there must also be a gravity of purpose and immediacy of execution. And there's no evidence to show that my client wanted to execute their putative threat.
What about the whole swatting incident where he calls out the SWAT team to go to the victim's house?
Your Honor,
Isn't that a gravity of execution or immediate act towards executing the threat?
Your Honor, the swatting incident is a completely separate incident from the putative threat. There's nothing in the putative threat pointing directly to swatting, and therefore there's nothing in the swatting incident pointing back to the putative threat.
All right, go ahead.
We can look to the analogous case of In re Ricky T, where in this case it was ruled because there was no accompanying physical force, it showed no gravity of purpose. In this case, a student was accidentally hit in the face with a door by a teacher. In response, the student said, "I'm going to kick your blank, I'm going to get you." And the court ruled that these statements alone, though rude, were not enough to hold a gravity of purpose.
But that teacher was not in fear. Wasn't that the holding in that case, that since there was no sustained fear, the threat didn't matter? In this case, we have victims saying that he was fearful because of those threats that were made.
Your Honor, it's the defense's position that Sawyer Smith was not in fear. And Your Honor, even if he was in fear, it was unreasonable under the circumstances.
All right, thank you. You can go ahead and continue.
And the court rules in the case of In re Ricky T that because there was no accompanying physical force, it showed no gravity of purpose. In our case, there was no accompanying physical force, and nothing to give it a gravity of purpose. Therefore, my client's statement cannot constitute a criminal threat. The last critical rule, Your Honor, is that the person receiving the threat must be in reasonable sustained fear, and that's not the case with Sawyer Smith. In the case of In re Ricky T, it was ruled that the teacher wasn't in fear because they didn't report their fear to the police. Similarly, Sawyer Smith didn't report his fear. He continued to stream a movie as if it was any other day of the week. And additionally, he replied to my client's comment by saying, "LOL, as if you're done now, bye."
But what about the Chandler case, which says that even though the person doesn't express fear, it doesn't mean they can't be in sustained fear?
Yes, Your Honor, but Sawyer Smith could have still easily reported his fear to the police without showing it to his followers.
All right, you can go ahead.
In the case of Inouye Ricky T, it was ruled that the teacher wasn't in fear because he didn't report to fear to the police, similarly to the case with Sawyer Smith. But Your Honor, even if Sawyer Smith was in fear, it was completely unreasonable under the circumstances. In the case of People v. Jackson, the Court of Appeals ruled that the landlord's fear was unreasonable under the circumstances. And in that case, Your Honor, the landlord had asked the defendant to leave, and the defendant responded by getting a weapon. In that case, the landlords then watched the defendant on the porch, unbeknown of what they were going to do next, showing that their fear was unreasonable under the circumstances. The court ruled that actual fear is not enough if unreasonable under the circumstances, and there's nothing to show that Sawyer Smith's fear was reasonable under any circumstances. In conclusion, Your Honor, the defense respectfully requests that the 995 motion be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Prosecution, your argument?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I please the court? The people request that Your Honor deny the defense's 995 motion to dismiss count 2 criminal threats because the defendant's threat was unequivocal, evidenced by the surrounding circumstances of the threat, and because Ms. Sawyer Smith was indeed in sustained fear. The defense would like to argue that Reagan Klein's comment was not unequivocal, for there were individual sentences that had no clear action for Smith to be fearful of, that there was no immediacy. However, we must look at the cohesive piece, from beginning to end, as Ms. Sawyer Smith would have read that very day. And in examining the entirety of the threat, we can see that there is a clear motive.
Well, counsel, we see threats like this on the internet all the time, every day. Every day on Twitter, you hear people threatening people. Are we going to prosecute every person who makes a threat like this just because they post it online?
Yes, Your Honor, we cannot prosecute every single person. However, in this case, we must look at the surrounding circumstances as well, in addition to the contents of the threat. And the surrounding circumstances show that there was sufficient history of animosity.
What about the defense argument that this threat is not specific enough? There's no unequivocal threat, it's just kind of a generic threat. How do you respond to that?
Yes, Your Honor. The threat may lack some factors of element 4 that CalCrim 1300 requires, and the case of George T. does state that the primary factors in considering a true threat is the contents of the threat. However, the case of George T. also states that if the contents are vague, we must weigh more heavily the surrounding circumstances.
All right, so what are those surrounding circumstances that make up for the lack of specificity in the threat?
Yes, Your Honor. In this case, there are 2. 1, the history of animosity, and 2, conduct suggesting to kill.
All right, you go ahead and continue with your argument.
Now, we must read the statement in its entirety. You deserve to die. I'm going to get you for this. I hate you. When you're dead, no one will even miss you, you monstrous slime of a person. When you're dead, no one will even miss you. You think you could stick me with a $34,000 lawsuit and just get away with it? Watch your back, Sawyer. I'm coming for you. The defendant clearly addressed a motive, the $34,000 lawsuit, to Sawyer Smith, and directly addressed this to Sawyer Smith. Now, once again, we must not only consider the contents of the threat, but we must consider the circumstances surrounding the case at bar. And there was, once again, a history of animosity and conduct suggesting to kill. Now, Ms. Smith had dropped Reagan Klein as a friend, and Ms. Reagan Klein, in return, catfished and humiliated Sawyer Smith. Sawyer Smith, in turn, revealed Reagan's deepest, darkest secret, causing her to get fired and threatened to be sued with a $34,000 lawsuit. In addition to the lawsuit and having recently gotten from her job, she also had college debt that she had to pay. And under the stress of all this, the defendant threatened Sawyer Smith.
But doesn't there need to be some sustained fear, and where is it in this case?
Yes, Your Honor. Elements 5 and 6 of the CalCrim does state that Sawyer Smith must be in sustained and reasonable fear. Now, Sawyer Smith must have been in sustained fear, not because she wrote the comments LOL, but as the case of Chandler says, victims who have been put in a state of sustained fear can indicate that they have lack of fear because they don't want to show that they have been intimidated by the defendant or by the threat.
All right, thank you. You can go ahead with your argument.
Yes, Your Honor. So Ms. Sawyer Smith was indeed in sustained and reasonable fear. Ms. Sawyer Smith, though she did write the comments LOL as if, She did not mean it. And in her witness statement, she writes, "I was trying to look tough for my followers." So not only did she want to not look intimidated in front of the defendant, she wanted to look tough for her followers. And because she had a reputation to uphold, she believed she could not show that fear. And also, Your Honor, subsequent to the threat, Smith had gotten swatted. And immediately after she had been swatted and sustained considerable damage while she was in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, Smith had immediately thought of the defendant and the threat. She notified Officer Keegan Lopez of who she thought might be the sender of the text tip, and she had shown Officer Keegan Lopez the threat that Reagan had sent earlier that day. There is a conduct suggesting to kill. Reagan Klein, who had sworn to get revenge on Sawyer Smith by sending the false tip, was able to carry out the threat.
What about the Jackson case? In that case, the threat was, "I'm going to blow your head off with an AK-47. The court said that wasn't enough. This doesn't rise to that level.
Yes, Your Honor. From People v. Jackson and the case at bar, there are two distinctions. One, yes, there was a specific language involved in the case of Jackson. However, there were absolutely no surrounding circumstances involving the defendant and the landlords, the two parties that were involved in the threats. And also, the landlords were considered to have unreasonable fear because the defendant was in a clear line of sight without the weapon that the defendant mentioned he would shoot them with. So the question we must not ask ourselves is not whether or not they had a lack of reasonable fear, but whether they had unreasonable fear. And in this case, there are no evidence to show that Sawyer Smith was in a state of unreasonable fear.
Thank you. Go ahead, continue.
So Miss Sawyer Smith, for the whole day, had been thinking of the defendant and her threat, and when Miss Reagan Klein had finally executed the threat, Miss Sawyer Smith had thought immediately of the defendant, showing that she was in sustained fear. Officer Keegan Lopez, who also saw the threat, deemed the comment threatening, also showing that the threat was reasonable and her fear was reasonable. And finally, Your Honor, the defendant intended to communicate this threat to Sawyer Smith. This is shown in the case of DC versus RR, where the message and its transmission, the whole process of typing it out and sending it over electronic communication, showed clear deliberation. For these reasons, because the threat itself was unequivocal, evidenced by the surrounding circumstances of the day, and because Ms. Sawyer Smith was in sustained fear, and because the defendant intended to threaten Sawyer Smith, that the people request that Your Honor deny the defense's 995 motion.
Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
Defense, you've got 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel has brought up the fact that my client had a motive. But Your Honor, that is not a relevant ruling factor according to California Penal Code 422. And additionally, my client's statement was an off-the-cuff statement because they made it in response to Sawyer Smith's gloating post. They were typing and they weren't looking back. Like in the case of In re George T., where in this case, the student was hit in the face with the door by the teacher and said, "I'm going to get you." In our case, Reagan Klein was hit with a $34,000 lawsuit and said, "I'm going to get you," in an off-the-cuff remark. Opposing counsel has also brought up the fact of the surrounding circumstances. And Your Honor, the court only looks at these when the statement is vague, which the defense agrees. And those three are no accompanying threatening gestures, which are not present in our case, no immediate prospect of execution, which is not present in our case either because the swatting incident is a completely separate thing from my client's putative threat, and lastly, no history of animosity. And Your Honor, there is no history of animosity in our case. Sawyer Smith had decided to drop my client as a friend. My client, in response, decided to start a catfishing account to show Sawyer Smith the light. But Your Honor, this doesn't count as animosity because Sawyer Smith didn't know it was my client. The only animosity that begun was when Sawyer Smith decided to get my client fired from her job at Hennessy's.
30 seconds.
And Your Honor, the actions following that happened over a 24-hour period. That does not count as a history of animosity. Also touching on the fact of sustained fear. Your Honor, this must be reasonable under the circumstances according to the ruling of People v. Jackson. And Your Honor, if we look at Sawyer Smith's actions, they are not reasonable under the circumstances. Therefore, the defense respectfully requests that the 995 motion be granted and count 2 of criminal threat be dropped. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Prosecution, you have 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
While the CalCrim does state that motive is not a factor in the case, I have brought it up to show that there was indeed a history of animosity, a clear and specific motive that was directly addressed to Sawyer Smith. And on top of that, the defendant had sent watcher back Sawyer, directly addressing the victim in the case at hand. Now, the defense has also brought up the case of George T., saying that Reagan Klein only responded in anger. However, DC versus RR says the exact opposite, that the message and its transmission, the fact that it had been typed out without any grammatical errors, and that the transmission of it electronically shows deliberation. And also, if it was indeed in a haze, in a fit of anger that Reagan Klein had sent the threats, why had she not deleted it? She had kept that post for the duration of the day until Smith had gotten swatted. Now, as for the swatting incident, we can see from People versus Martinez that not only can a vague threat be considered a true threat, that the second count, arson in that case, was a supporting and indicating factor to prove count 1, criminal threat. And that case is directly analogous to the case at hand, for though the threat was vague, the conduct suggesting to kill proved that the circumstances were evidence enough to put Ms. Sawyer Smith in fear. And for these reasons, the prosecution would like to request that you deny the defense's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Before I rule on the motion, students may confer with their attorney or teacher coach regarding any trial irregularities. Please note this time should be used to raise substantial rule violations only and should not be used to argue additional points of law or rebut opponents' arguments. Arguing for hyper-technical interpretations of the rules, especially when designed to embarrass others or to gain an unfair advantage, is prohibited. You have 30 seconds to confer. Please do so now.
The prosecution has none, Your Honor.
All right. Would either side like to note any trial irregularities?
The defense has none, Your Honor.
All right. So, first of all, let me congratulate both of you on your arguments. Both did an excellent job of making your points. First Amendment does guarantee freedom of speech. However, there are limits on our freedom of speech, and the penal code section that's been charged in this case is one of those limits. The court does find that the threats were sufficiently unequivocal, unconditional, and immediate to indicate that there was a true threat, and there is evidence that the victim in this case was in sustained fear, and for those reasons the court is going to deny the defense 995 motion at this time. Thank you both.
Your Honor, before we proceed, may we have a moment to rearrange?
Please. Is there any physical evidence that needs to be presented for inspection?
Yes, Your Honor. The people ask that exhibits A through E be marked for identification.
All right, those will be marked for identification. Is there anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. The people would like to know whether the exhibits should be moved by the attorneys or the bailiff.
The attorneys may move the exhibits. They can hand them to the witnesses or fold them up, whatever you need to do to ask questions, that's fine.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
Any questions from the defense side?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So this is the people of the state of California versus Reagan Klein. Reagan Klein is charged in count 1 with reporting a false emergency, which occurs when any person knows that the report is false and knows or should know that the response to the report is likely to cause death or great bodily injury, and great bodily injury or death is sustained by any person as a result of the false report. And in count 2, the defendant is charged with making a criminal threat, which occurs when any person willfully threatens to commit a crime which will result in death or great bodily injury to another person. Prosecution, are you ready to present your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Sawyer Smith was a popular social media influencer who was even offered her own brand deal. But on the night of August 14th, a SWAT team broke down the door of her house and entered with firearms. Terrified, Miss Smith slipped and tumbled down her stairs, breaking her femur. Today, the court will learn that the defendant, Reagan Klein, hated Sawyer Smith, that she wanted revenge because Miss Smith got her fired and nearly sued for $34,000. The evidence will show that only hours before the swatting incident, the defendant threatened Miss Smith, then put her words into action. The defendant is charged on 2 counts, false report of an emergency and criminal threat. Your Honor, revenge begins with betrayal. The defendant, Reagan Klein, had been Sawyer's best friend since middle school. But when Sawyer ended the relationship for her social media status, Reagan grew resentful. She sought new friends in Holmes and Marlo Patterson, then humiliated Sawyer with a fake account under the name of Hayden Carlton. In response, Miss Smith decided to retaliate. Over 6 months earlier, Reagan had broken a $34,000 oven at the restaurant where both she and Sawyer worked, but lied to avoid blame. When Miss Smith told the owner, Sam Kloss, she immediately fired Reagan. Later that day, Miss Smith posted a victory picture, and in response, the defendant threatened her, saying, "You deserve to die. I'm going to get you for this. You just wait." Miss Smith feared for her life, and that night, her house was broken into by a SWAT team. After calling in that the tip they had received about a hostage situation was fake, Officer Lopez rode with Sawyer in the ambulance, where she learned about the defendant's threat. Officer Lopez will testify that when she drove to the defendant's house, she found the flip phone that had been used to send the false text tip at 9:08 p.m. You will hear from Holmes that at that time, there were only 3 people with access to that phone. Marlo Patterson was talking to his sister. Miss Holmes was downstairs picking up pizza. But as she returned, she saw the defendant, Reagan Klein, closing the flip phone, just after the fake tip was sent. And Dr. Dakota Chung will testify that the text matches the defendant's writing style. Your Honor, at the conclusion of this trial, there will be one indisputable verdict. Reagan Klein is guilty of false report of an emergency and of criminal threat. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, would you like to give your opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
On June 1st, 2018, Sawyer Smith dropped my client, Reagan Klein, as a friend, claiming she was not fit to be part of his newly found social media brand, and thus breaking a friendship that lasted for 8 years, from middle school all the way until college. Swirling with devastation, Reagan Klein at this time befriended Marlo Patterson and Holmes, who took her in and let her express the heartbroken feelings she developed towards Sawyer Smith. The trio decided to create a catfish account, trying to lower Sawyer Smith's newfound confidence that swiftly turned into bragging. And after months of participating on the account, Sawyer Smith never showed a negative reaction, so the trio continued to mess with Sawyer. On August 14th, 2018, Sawyer Smith purposefully exposed a secret kept between Reagan Klein and herself as a way of getting back at Ms. Klein and resulting in Ms. Klein getting fired from her job. Confused, Reagan Klein went home that day and checked her social media app to find a picture of Sawyer Smith smirking, almost gloating after the firing of Reagan Klein. Devastated and confused, Reagan Klein expressed her emotions into one comment on Sawyer Smith's now-picked photo. That night, Reagan Klein, enjoying a relaxing evening with Marlo, Patterson, and Cameron Holmes, got a surprise knock on her door coming from the police. It was then explained to Reagan Klein that there had been a swatting incident at Sawyer Smith's residence resulting in injury. Shocked by the description of the event, Reagan Klein was even more surprised for being promptly arrested for making a criminal threat. Your Honor, Reagan Klein behaved badly. She was one to participate in the catfish account, and she did write a comment that was a little much. But Your Honor, there is a difference between behaving poorly and breaking the law. Additionally, you'll hear conflicting testimony tonight as to who sent the text to the police. Our expert witness, Dr. Williams, will testify that it is more likely that Cameron Holmes sent the text tip to the police. The prosecution will try to twist the facts of this case to fit their distorted reality of Reagan Klein. But Your Honor, Ms. Klein is a college student. And this is simply about a friendship gone south and a hurt woman struggling with the betrayal of her best friend. At the conclusion of this trial, the defense respectfully requests a verdict of not guilty. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. All right, prosecution, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Excuse me. The people call Officer Keegan Lopez to the stand.
Officer Keegan Lopez. Please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Officer Keegan Lopez, L-O-P-E-Z.
Good morning.
Good morning. May I inquire?
You may.
Good morning, Officer Lopez. Good morning, ma'am. Officer Lopez, please describe your occupation.
I'm an officer on the East Flamingo Police Force, and I've been an officer for the past 20 years. I'm also part of East Flamingo's Special Weapons and Tactics team.
Directing your attention to Exhibit A, do you recognize it?
Yes, ma'am, I do. It is the text-a-tip that our department received on August 14th at 21:08 hours.
Please read it to the court.
Hostage situation at 511 East Flamingo Parkway. Man with gun approached Sawyer, pointed gun at Sawyer's heart, and forced Sawyer inside the house. Sounded like he said, "This is what you deserve." Had a suspicious backpack. Really possible there are more weapons inside. Don't think he was trying to steal valuables. Please hurry. Didn't want to get too close. Figured he'd see me and take me too. Hurry, hurry.
Officer Lopez, about how many characters is this text-a-tip?
The text-a-tip is about 400 characters.
The people would like to move Exhibit A into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit A will be received into evidence.
How did you respond to the text-a-tip?
Well, when the department received the text-a-tip, we went to the address immediately. When we got there, we banged on the door very loudly for several minutes. When nobody answered, we rammed down the door and entered.
Was anyone injured?
Yes. Miss Sawyer Smith slipped down the stairs and broke her femur.
What happened next?
The paramedics came in to help Miss Smith, and I rode with them to the hospital.
Well, what did you do about the text?
Since the house was empty, I called it in to my department as a false report of an emergency, commonly known as swatting. And then in the back of the ambulance, I started asking Miss Smith some questions because she kept repeating the words, "I know who did this. It was Reagan Klein."
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay?
May I be heard?
Yes.
This is not hearsay because it is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather to show why Officer Lopez took subsequent action.
Objections overruled.
What did you learn from Miss Smith?
Miss Smith showed me the comment that the Hayden account had posted on her picture earlier that day. She told me that she was terrified of Miss Klein.
Did you take subsequent action?
Yes, Miss Smith was visibly afraid, and I thought the message sounded very threatening, so I went to Miss Reagan
Your
Klein's.
Honor, improper opinion as to threatening.
Excuse me, Your Honor. This opinion is admissible because it is helpful to a clear understanding of her testimony, and it is based rationally on her perception.
Your Honor, the officer cannot testify as to a comment being threatening or not. That will later be determined in trial.
This is the trial. I think she can give that opinion based on the information she has. The objection's overruled. You may continue.
So when you went to Miss Klein's apartment, what did you do when you got there?
When I got there, I asked Miss Klein about the comment and about the Hayden account. Miss Klein admitted to being an operator of the account and to posting the comment.
Did you do anything else?
Yes, ma'am, I did. I saw a flip phone charging. It was plugged into the wall. I asked Miss Klein if I could take a look at it. She told me it belonged to Miss Cameron Holmes, so I asked Miss Holmes if I could see the phone.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is launched into a narrative. Move to strike.
What are you moving to strike?
Move to strike everything after what the witness did.
Overruled. Next question.
How did Miss Holmes respond when you asked her if you could look at the flip phone?
Miss Holmes told me I could, picked up the phone, and handed it to me without looking at the screen.
Now, that night, did the defendant admit to ever using the phone?
Yes, ma'am. Miss Klein claims she looked at the phone once, at 21:11 hours, 3 minutes after the text-to-tip was sent.
Well, does she mention seeing the text-to-tip on the screen?
No, ma'am. Miss Klein claims she didn't know anything about it.
Well, when you looked at the phone, did you see the text-to-tip on the screen?
Yes, ma'am. It was the first thing I saw on the screen.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good morning, officer.
Good morning.
As you stated on direct, you received a text-to-tip message at 21:08 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, officer, you have no way of knowing when this text-to-tip message was written, only when it was received, though. Isn't that right?
Yes, it was received at 21:08 hours.
Thank you, officer. Now, later on during that night, you went to Ms. Klein's residence. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
And once you arrived at the residence, you told Cameron, Marlo, and Reagan about the swatting incident that had just occurred. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you interviewed Cameron separately, you asked him or her, what were you doing at 9:08 p.m.? Is that correct?
Yes, I asked her that.
And Cameron Holmes conveniently replied with, I was gone for almost 10 minutes to pick up the pizzas. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what Miss Holmes said.
Thank you. Now, you also interviewed Mr. Patterson, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
And Mr. Patterson showed you his Yum Yum delivery order history. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And in the Yum Yum delivery order history, it says that the pizza was delivered at 9:02 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what the order delivery history says.
Thank you. And further on in this interview with Mr. Patterson, Patterson told you that Cameron Holmes was checking the flip phone pretty regularly throughout the night. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And Mr. Patterson also told you that Reagan Klein was not on the flip phone at all during the night. Is that correct?
Miss Patterson did not see Miss Klein with the flip phone at all during the night, but Miss Patterson was on the phone, so I did not...
Is that a yes to my question, officer?
Could you please repeat the question?
Mr. Patterson told you that Miss Klein was not on the flip phone at all during the night.
Objection. This question calls for hearsay.
You want to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. This statement is not being offered to show the truth of the matter. This is being offered to show the witness's state of mind and why the witness is biased for disregarding information for vital witnesses.
All right. Objections overruled. You may continue.
Is that a yes to my question, officer?
No. Mr. Patterson told me that she did not see anyone on the phone, but Mr. Patterson did not say for certain that Miss Klein was not on the phone.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is being non-responsive. Move to strike everything after what Mr. Patterson stated.
All right. Everything after what Mr. Patterson stated will be stricken.
Now, you also interviewed Ms. Klein. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And Ms. Klein said that Cameron Holmes was gone for no more than 5 minutes to pick up the pizzas?
That is Ms. Klein's opinion, correct?
Thank you. And now, after everything Mr. Patterson told you, you felt that what he said wasn't worth much because he's on the phone. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Finally, officer, you interviewed 3 people other than Sawyer Smith. Is that correct?
Yes, I interviewed Ms. Klein, Mr. Patterson, and Ms. Holmes.
Thank you. And out of those 3 people, you only turned in writing samples from 2 of the 3. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I apply?
Yes.
Officer Lopez, why did you not turn in a writing sample from Marlo Patterson?
Because Marlo Patterson did not give me a writing sample.
When was the tip sent?
The text-to-tip was sent at 21:08 hours.
And why did you add false emergency report to Reagan's charges?
After interviewing Ms. Klein, Ms. Holmes, and Mr. Patterson, as well as receiving the opinion of
Objection, Your
Dr.
Honor. Outside the scope of cross-examination.
Do you want to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. This cross-examination covered Ms. Klein's connection to the false emergency report and why she would not be convicted.
The objection's overruled. The answer remains.
Was there anything else?
Yes, I received the opinion of Dr. Dakota Chung, a forensic linguist expert, and I concluded that I had probable cause to add false report of emergency to the charge of criminal threat.
Thank you. No further questions. May this witness be excused?
Yes, you may step down, and the people may call their next witness.
The people would like to call Sawyer Smith to the stand.
Sawyer Smith, please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? I do. You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Sawyer Smith, S-M-I-T-H.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Good morning, Ms. Smith.
Good morning.
Do you know the defendant, Reagan Klein?
Yes, I do.
Is the defendant present in court today?
She is. She is sitting at the end of the council table wearing a black blazer.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant?
Yes.
How do you know the defendant?
Reagan and I have been friends since middle school, but we grew distant and I eventually had to end our friendship.
Why did you have to end your friendship?
Well, I posted a selfie on my NowPic account, and then it went viral. I seriously couldn't believe it. I was even offered a brand deal with a local fitness company to be a full-time social media influencer, and I just didn't see my friendship with Reagan to be a part of that.
Did you ever share about this brand deal with anyone?
Yes, of course I did, especially with my coworkers.
After telling your coworkers, did anything happen?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, vague and ambiguous.
You understand the question?
Yes.
All right, overruled. You may answer.
I started getting messages from under the account name of Hayden Carlton. We messaged all the time, and Hayden was hot. But then came the humiliation.
How were you humiliated?
It was horrible. Hayden invited me on a date, and I ghosted him. But that wasn't even the most embarrassing part.
Then what was the most embarrassing part?
I'd say about 30 minutes later, the Hayden account posted a humiliating photo of me sitting alone. I knew from the really mean caption that I'd probably been catfished.
Could you explain to the court what catfishing is?
Yes, catfishing is when someone uses a fake account to flirt with them to make them think that they're in a relationship.
So what did you do, Miss Smith, after realizing you were catfished?
I was so embarrassed, so I tried to pretend that it didn't happen, try to forget about it, but that only made things worse.
Why do you say that?
The Hayden account posted photos of me with terrible captions for the next 2 weeks, and you can say that it was pretty awful.
How did you decide to respond to this?
After the Hayden account posted about a time of bird pooped on my jacket when Reagan was the only one there, on August 14th, I decided to tell our boss Sam about the oven that Reagan had broken.
And why did you do that?
I expected Sam to fire Reagan, which happened.
What happened after the defendant was fired?
I'll admit it was really petty, but I felt on top of the world, so I posted a victory selfie on my NowPic account.
And did the defendant respond?
Yes, Reagan left an angry, scary comment on my post.
Ms. Smith, what did this comment say?
You deserve to die. I'm going to get you for this, you just wait. I hate you. When you're dead, no one will even miss you, you monstrous slime of a person. I'm going to get you, Sawyer. You just wait.
How did you react?
I was so terrified, but at the time my social media status was everything to me. It was my life, so I just tried to seem tough for my followers.
But did anything happen that night after the defendant made the comment?
Yes, that was the night my house got swatted. It was so terrifying.
What did you do?
I ran out to the top of the stairs, but I totally freaked out when there were SWAT team members and police. It got so loud and they were screaming at me not to move.
Were you hurt?
Yes, I was so afraid that I slipped and fell down the stairs. I felt my leg snap and I was in so much pain that I even blacked out.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you need a tissue? You okay? All right. You may go ahead and cross-examine.
Good morning, Ms. Smith.
Good morning.
Now, Ms. Smith, Ms. Klein wasn't active on her social media, was she?
I guess not, no.
And she never posted on her outfit, did she?
She did post that one scary comment.
But I mean, other than that, she didn't post it. Right?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance as to whether or not Ms. Klein used her now pick account often.
Maybe her gone?
Yes.
This is going to provide foundation for further questioning.
All right. The objection's overruled. You may continue.
So other than that, she didn't post on it, right?
No, she didn't.
And that was one of your reasons for dropping her as a friend, right?
We were already growing distant, and yes.
And now, Ms. Smith, the first time that you became aware of Ms. Klein the first time that you became aware of Ms. Klostian's oven being broken was over New Year's Eve, right?
Yes.
And you waited over 7 months to tell Ms. Klostian about the oven, right?
Well, I didn't feel I was even in the place to tell
Ms.
Sam.
Smith. That wasn't my question. I just asked that you waited over 7 months to tell Ms. Klostian.
Yes, I did tell Sam.
And when you did tell Ms. Klostian, you told her that you had just found out about the oven being broken. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
And after you told Ms. Klostian, Ms. Klein was fired from her job, right?
She was.
And that's when you posted a petty selfie, right?
Yes.
And Ms. Klein commented on the selfie.
She did.
And as you testified, you were pretty scared, right?
I was terrified.
But you replied to Ms. Klein's comment, didn't you?
That was my way of seeming tough for my followers.
Thank you. That wasn't my question. I just asked that you replied to Ms. Klein's comment, right?
I did.
And you replied, LOL, as if you're done now, bye, didn't you?
Trying to seem tough, yes.
But you did reply that nonetheless, right?
Yes.
And in fact, after that, you went home alone, lay in bed and streamed a movie. Isn't that true?
That is.
And Miss Smith, you didn't ever immediately contact the police, did you?
I was so scared I didn't know what to do.
So you didn't?
No.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Smith, why didn't you immediately tell Ms. Klostian about the oven?
Like I said, I didn't feel I was in the place to tell Sam, because Reagan was the one that broke the oven.
And were you afraid of the defendant's comment?
Of course I was.
Then why did you comment LOL as if you're done now, bye?
I was trying to seem tough for my followers.
And finally, Ms. Smith, why did you not notify the police?
I thought I was in the security of my own home. I even locked all of my doors.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. You may step down. People may call their next witness.
People call Cameron Holmes to the stand.
Cameron Holmes. Please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? I do. You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Cameron Holmes, Holmes.
Your Honor, before I begin, may I rearrange the exhibits for this witness?
Please, yes.
Yes.
May I begin?
Yes.
Good morning, Ms. Holmes.
Good morning.
Do you know Sawyer Smith?
Yes, we worked at Hennessy's together.
Do you know Reagan Klein?
Yes, we also worked at Hennessy's together, and a few months ago, she started hanging out with me and my friend Marlo after Sawyer became famous.
What did the three of you do after Sawyer became famous?
Well, Reagan wanted to catfish Sawyer, and Marlo and I agreed.
Why did you agree?
Even though I don't have anything against Sawyer, I mean, I barely even know her, she had been acting pretty obnoxious lately after becoming an influencer.
So how was this catfishing account used?
We all had access to it, but Reagan used it the most. We got some photos of a model from the internet to flirt with Sawyer.
Directing your attention to the night of August 14th, where were you?
I was at Reagan's apartment with Marlo and, of course, Reagan.
Do you remember what you were doing at 9:08 p.m.?
Yes, I was downstairs picking up some pizza.
How long were you downstairs?
I went down at 9, and the food came late, so I was down there for almost 10 minutes.
When you were downstairs, did you have your phone with you?
No, it was upstairs with Reagan and Marlo.
What kind of phone was this phone?
It was a flip phone that you have to open to see the time or do anything on it, and it had a number keypad that you have to use to text.
Directing your attention to Exhibit E, do you recognize it?
Yes, I do. It's a diagram of Reagan's apartment.
Does the spot marked phone accurately depict where you left your phone?
Yes, it does.
And where on the diagram were you?
I was over there downstairs.
The people would like to move Exhibit E into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Lack of foundation and lack of personal knowledge as to Exhibit E.
As to what?
Exhibit E, where Reagan and Marlo were standing.
Your Honor, this is not being admitted for where Reagan and Marlo were standing. Only Reagan and Marlo can testify to that. However, foundation has been laid for Exhibit E as to the phone and the porch where the pizza was delivered.
All right, and it'll be admitted for those limited purposes at this time, subject to further foundation for the other.
Sorry, one more thing. It's a stipulated fact that Exhibit E is an accurate representation of Reagan's apartment.
And it's being admitted for that purpose as an accurate representation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, Ms. Holmes, to your knowledge, did either the defendant or Mr. Marlo Patterson touch your phone that night?
Yes. When I came upstairs, I saw Reagan closing my phone.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, may I inquire if the time remaining?
Defense has 5 minutes and 39 seconds for their cross-examination.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Please, yes.
Good morning, Ms. Holmes.
Good morning.
You had access to the catfish account, correct?
Yes, I did, along with Marlo and Reagan.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to one of the posts made on this catfish account. You added hashtag karma to it, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, let's just get this out of the way. As you stated on the direct, you said you had no beef with Sawyer, is that correct?
Yes, I have nothing against her.
But one of your reasons for adding hashtag karma was, in your words, because Smith only had Smith to blame for this, is that right?
Yes, I did say that. She was a bit annoying at sometimes.
Thank you. Now, another reason for adding hashtag karma was, in your words, I really wanted to drive it home because this is what Smith deserved, is that right?
Yes, she was bragging a lot.
Thank you. Now, throughout the course of this catfish account, you grew to dislike Miss Klein, is that correct?
Miss Klein?
Yes.
No, I've always liked Reagan.
Well, you believed that Miss Klein was a jerk.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
And you believed that Miss Klein was trying to steal your best friend away from you, is that correct?
Yes, I did believe that.
And you even overheard Miss Klein and her best friend talking about how they can't wait to go back to the university so they don't have to deal with you crashing their hangouts all the time, is that correct?
Yes, I did hear that.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the night of August 14th. You were the owner of the flip phone that the text message was sent through, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
And the officer told you about the swatting incident that had just occurred, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And the officer asked you, what were you doing at 9:08 p.m., is that correct?
Yes.
And conveniently, in response to what were you doing at 9:08 p.m., you replied with, I was gone for almost 10 minutes to pick up the pizzas, is that correct?
Yes, I was downstairs.
But you didn't have your flip phone with you when you went downstairs to pick up the pizzas, is that right?
No, it was upstairs with Reagan.
Thank you. And your flip phone has a clock on it, is that correct?
Yes, it does.
So the almost 10 minutes you told the officer you were gone for was only your best estimate, yes or no?
Objection, Your Honor, unfair extrapolation.
Do you want to be heard, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to direct your attention to the witness's statement, page 29, lines 51 to 52. It says, I was waiting downstairs for almost 10 minutes. This is not an exact amount of time, it is an estimate.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
This is an estimate in the statement. However, it's an unfair extrapolation to say that Ms. Holmes had no other way of checking the time besides her flip phone, which was upstairs.
Well, the aspect of her testimony relating to an estimate of the time, that will remain. As far as whether or not she had any other means of telling the time, that's not in the record. So the objection is sustained on that basis alone. However, the rest of the answer remains, and the question is okay up until the point you got to the other means of telling the time. All right, so go ahead and continue with your cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Do you remember the question?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
Yes, almost 10 minutes that you told the officer was only your best estimate, is that correct?
Yes, I had a general sense of how long 10 minutes was.
It was not an exact time nonetheless, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, before redirect, may I request a time check?
Prosecution has 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Holmes, do you have anything against Sawyer Smith?
No, I do not.
Does your relationship with Ms. Klein affect the truthfulness of your testimony today?
No, of course not.
Does your view of the relationship between Mr. Patterson and Ms. Klein affect the truthfulness of your testimony today?
No, it does not.
And on the night of August 14th, who else had access to your phone besides you?
Reagan and Marlo.
Thank you. No further questions. May
Thank
this
you.
witness be excused?
You may step down, and the people may call their next witness.
The people call Dr. Dakota Chung to the stand.
Dr. Dakota Chung, please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Dr. Dakota Chung, C-H-E-U-N-G.
May I inquire?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I rearrange the exhibits for this witness?
Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Chung.
Good morning.
What is your occupation?
I have been a professor of linguistics at the University of California for 18 years.
What qualifications do you have?
Well, I received my PhD in linguistics from Western California University, and I've also conducted over 100 independent studies on author identification in various formats.
Have you served as an expert witness before?
Yes, I have, on 40 prior cases covering author identification based on writing samples, voice pattern analysis, and the impact of using different question types during police interviews.
How are you involved with this case?
I examined the false text the social media post made by the Hayden account, 76 social media posts made by Reagan Klein, and 92 social media posts made by Karen Holmes in order to determine who is more likely the author of the false tip.
How did you analyze the social media posts?
I used a stylistic approach described by Dr. Tim Grant, a highly respected British forensic linguist. This method of analyzing is well suited for shorter messages, such as texts, tweets, and other social media posts.
Why do you prefer this approach?
Well, the examination of all the various stylistic elements of a writing sample allow for more precise and comprehensive comparison than merely looking at the vocabulary.
Your Honor, may the witness approach the exhibits?
Yes, you can go ahead. Approach.
Directing your attention to Exhibit C, do you recognize it?
Yes, it is the document I created listing the key features of both Reagan and Cameron and comparing them to the features found in the false tip.
Were you able to determine who the author of the fake tip was?
Yes, Reagan Klein.
How did you arrive at this conclusion?
Well, as you can see from Exhibit C, Table 3, the features that are distinctive of Reagan Klein, such as multiple typographic exclamations, the use of quotation marks, the use of ellipses, the use of commas, the use of 8-letter longer adjectives were all present in the false tip, except for the use of a single space between word and emoji, because as you know, there are no emojis on a flip phone keyboard. Therefore, all this data points to Reagan Klein being the author of the false tip.
In your professional opinion, could Cameron Holmes have written the tip?
In my professional opinion, Cameron Holmes can be ruled out as a possible author because several of her features, such as misspellings, prosodic emphasizers, and mixed typographic exclamations, were not present in the tip at all. In addition, features are generally the result of habit and not by conscious choice, and certain features of Cameron's would be especially difficult to overcome.
Which features of Cameron's writing would be difficult for her to overcome?
Well, one of them would be misspellings. Cameron tends to make misspellings on her social media posts, although the false tip contains 0. On top of that, the false tip, which contained 8-letter or longer adjectives, was written on a flip phone without autocorrect.
And finally, Dr. Chung, who was the author of the false report?
Reagan Klein, not Cameron Holmes, is the author of the false tip.
Thank you. You may resume your seat. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, may I inquire as to the time remaining?
Yes.
And before I proceed, may I approach the exhibits during my examination?
Yes.
The defense has 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Chung.
Good morning.
So, you're familiar with Dr. Williams' involvement in this case?
Yes, I am.
So, you analyzed the same authors that Dr. Williams did, correct?
Correct.
And was one of them Miss Klein?
Yes, that was.
And the other one was Miss Holmes?
Correct.
Alright. So the method that you used was a stylistic analysis in your approach, correct?
That is correct.
Alright, and you're aware that Dr. Williams used a traditional stylistic analysis as well, correct?
I believe mainly focusing on the vocabulary, yes.
Alright, but you're aware that she uses traditional stylistic analysis?
I believe she looked over my analysis, yes.
Traditional stylistic analysis, I asked.
Yes.
Alright, and in addition, Dr. Williams analyzed distinctive vocabulary choices.
Yes, her primary focus.
Okay. So, approaching Exhibit C, Dr. Chung, you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
Alright. So, looking to whole word number homophone substitution. There are 2 of those present in the tip, correct?
Correct.
But Reagan Klein never uses those in her writings.
That is correct.
But Cameron Holmes uses them 9 times.
Yes, 9 times out of 92 posts.
Yeah, 92 posts. So, looking at whole word letter homophone substitution. There's one of those present in the false tip, correct?
Yes, once.
Yes. And in Cameron Holmes' writings, it's analyzed 13 times.
Yes, 13 times out of 92 posts.
Out of 92 posts. And 0 are present in Reagan Klein's writings.
That is correct.
So lastly, looking at shortening, specifically really to RLLY and please to PLZ, there are 2 of those present in the tip, correct?
Correct.
And Cameron Holmes uses them 21 times, correct?
Correct.
But Reagan Klein never uses those in her writings.
That is correct.
Okay. Dr. Chung, you stated that the author, for the sake of consistency, let's say it's Cameron Holmes, could have disguised the writing style to look or sound like Miss Klein's. You stated that, correct?
I did state that in my testimony, yes.
All right. So, Dr. Chung, can you say with absolute certainty that Miss Klein was the author of the test tip?
Well, obviously, I can't be completely certain because I didn't see Reagan Klein writing the tip. But what I am certain of is that the
Objection,
features...
Your Honor. The witness is being non-responsive. I asked him. He was absolutely certain. Calls for a yes, sir.
sustained, and everything after his answer that he can't be completely certain will be stricken.
Thank you, Dr. Chung. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Chung, whose writing features are more prevalent in the tip, Reagan's or Cameron's?
Reagan Klein.
Does Dr. Williams' analysis of the vocabulary choices change your opinion as to who wrote the tip?
No, it does not.
And why do you believe that Cameron is not the author of the tip?
Well, although Cameron frequently uses misspellings in her social media posts, the false tip contains none. On top of that, features are generally the result of habit and not by conscious choice.
And finally, why did you focus on the features rather than the vocabulary choices?
Because it allows for more precise and comprehensive comparison than Dr. Williams' distinctive vocabulary analysis.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. May this witness be excused?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Chung. You can step down.
The people would like to move Exhibit C into evidence.
All right, any objection to people moving Exhibit C into evidence?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit C will be received into evidence.
At this time, the people rest.
All right, the people having rested, is the defense ready to proceed with their case?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may call your first witness.
The defense calls Dr. Williams to the stand.
Dr. Williams, please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? I do. You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Blake Williams, Williams.
Before I proceed, Your Honor, may I rearrange the exhibits?
Please, yes, you may.
And before I proceed, Your Honor, may I inquire as to the time remaining for closing argument?
Defense has 6 minutes and 39 seconds for their closing argument.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Williams.
Good morning.
Will you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Dr. Blake Williams. I have a PhD in linguistics from Eastern California University, and I've been a professor of linguistics at the University of California for the past 24 years.
And what is your experience in forensic linguistics?
Well, I've served as an expert witness for 70 prior cases and conducted over 120 independent studies, all based on author identification.
So what was your involvement in this case?
Just like Dr. Chung, I'm involved in this case to offer my expert opinion and help determine the author of the false text-to-tip. To do so, I examined the false text-to-tip report, the posts made by the Hayden account, a collection of social media posts from both Ms. Klein and Ms. Holmes, and Exhibit C. Additionally, I created Exhibit D for the case.
May the witness approach the exhibits?
Yes.
Approaching Exhibit D, Dr. Williams, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I created it for the case.
And will you please explain what Exhibit D portrays?
In Exhibit D, I focused on the distinctive vocabulary choices for both Ms. Klein and Ms. Holmes. This means I compiled words and diction I frequently noticed during my examinations and compared them to the vocabulary present in the false text-to-tip.
And will you provide examples of some distinctive vocabulary choices that you found?
Of course. As the exhibit shows, Ms. Klein tends to use descriptions including the word part, and tends to use various forms of the word value. On the other hand, Ms. Holmes tends to use words like really and please, with varied spelling, of course, and primarily focuses on what someone deserves, as seen in the false text-to-tip.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. You may be seated. At this time, the defense would like to move Exhibit D into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit D is received into evidence.
Dr. Williams, what approach do you use in your research?
In conducting my analysis, I followed the traditional stylistic approach and used finding distinctive and consistent vocabulary choices within both Ms. Klein's and Ms. Holmes' opposing writing features.
And what does this analysis tell her?
In the areas where Ms. Klein's writing features are present in the tip, it is my professional opinion that the author was attempting to replicate Ms. Klein's style of writing.
And why is that?
Nothing about the words distinctive of Ms. Klein's writing style appeared in what I would identify as the natural manner she employs in other posts. Instead, the words seemed dropped in, like someone was very particularly trying to make the post sound like Ms. Klein's writing.
So are you familiar with Dr. Chung's involvement in this case?
Yes, he is serving as an expert witness for the prosecution.
Do you agree with his conclusion?
Partially. Taking the various features shown in Exhibit C and D, I agree with Dr. Chung that the two possible authors have distinctive writing styles, and that an author of the text tip can be established. However, I disagree that the appropriate conclusion is that Ms. Klein wrote the tip.
So if you don't believe Ms. Klein wrote the tip, then who did?
Well, continuing under the large assumption that the only two possible authors are Ms. Klein and Ms. Holmes, it is my professional opinion that Cameron Holmes is more likely the author of the false text tip.
So I noticed you said two possible authors. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. Something significant to keep in mind when analyzing two possible authors is that the results are limited to saying which author is more likely to have written something, based on those two authors alone. Nothing in my or even Dr. Chung's analysis eliminates anyone else in the world from having written the tip.
So Dr. Williams, in your expert opinion, did Ms. Klein write the false text tip portrayed in Exhibit A?
In my expert opinion, Ms. Klein did not write the false text tip.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I inquire?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You believe that Cameron is more likely the author of the tip?
Based on my research, yes.
But Cameron makes frequent misspellings, doesn't she?
That's one of her unfortunate tendencies, yes.
And the tip was sent from a flip phone without autocorrect, wasn't it?
I believe so, yes.
The tip also contained a few 8-letter or longer adjectives, correct?
Yes, Ms. Klein has an affinity for longer words.
And yet none of the words in the tip were misspelled, were they?
That's correct.
Now, you admit that the features distinctive of Reagan's writing are more prevalent in the tip than those distinctive of Cameron's, correct?
Solely based on Exhibit C, yes.
But your conclusion that Cameron is more likely the author was based mainly on the vocabulary choices, correct?
Yes, it reveals an author's natural flow of writing.
But the entire text tip contains only 3 of Cameron's distinctive vocabulary choices, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the exhibit?
Yes.
Doesn't the tip also contain 3 of Reagan's distinctive vocabulary choices?
Yes, it does.
Now, the words in the tip distinctive of Reagan's writing are heart, valuables, and the I figure expression, correct?
Yes, those are seen in the text tip.
How many of Cameron's posts did you examine again?
I examined 92 of Cameron Holmes' posts.
And in those 92 posts, Cameron never uses the word value, or even anything related to value, does she?
That's correct.
Does she ever use the I figure expression?
No, because it's distinctive of Ms. Klein.
And yet both of those vocabulary choices are present in the tip, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Dr. Williams, although there are some similarities to Ms. Klein's writing in the false text tip, does that mean Ms. Klein wrote the tip?
Absolutely not. Even though some of Ms. Klein's writing features are present in the tip, they are oddly placed. And, as previous counsel has just mentioned, there is an equal amount of both Ms. Holmes and Ms. Klein's writing features, showing that it couldn't have been either one, casting reasonable doubt on the fact that Ms. Klein could have been the author.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. You may step down, and the defense may call their next witness.
The defense calls Sam Kloss to the stand.
Sam Kloss, please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Sam Klostian, K-O-L-O-S-T-I-A-N.
Before I proceed, may I inquire is there time remaining?
Yes.
Defense has 10 minutes and 10 seconds.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Ms. Klostian.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
I'm the proud owner and operator of Hennessy's Restaurant.
Do you know Ms. Klein?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know Ms. Klein?
Reagan is one of my former employees.
Why is Ms. Klein one of your former employees?
Well, on August 14th, I found out that Reagan broke my baker's part oven over New Year's, and she concealed the truth from me. I had to set an example, so I fired her.
Before you fired Ms. Klein, how long has she worked for you?
Reagan worked for me for 6 years.
Let's switch gears for a moment, Ms. Kloss. Are you familiar with the term swatting?
Yes, I am, unfortunately.
And how have you become familiar with this term?
One morning, before we opened the restaurant, my employees and I, we were all watching a new swatting incident that occurred recently.
And what, if anything, did you see in the new swatting incident?
Well, some kid had called SWAT on his enemy. The SWAT team surrounded the enemy's house, and unfortunately, the enemy's father was the only one home and was shot by the SWAT team officers.
Did you discuss the incident?
Yes, we all did.
And what was this discussion you had about?
Well, we all discussed about how reckless it was and how dangerous it was for someone to get hurt like that.
And was Cameron Holmes present for this discussion?
Yes, she was.
And was Ms. Klein present for the discussion?
Yes, she was.
And what, if anything, did you notice of Ms. Klein's reaction to the discussion?
Well, Reagan looked so upset by what that kid did to his enemy. She even commented on how horrible it was.
In the years that you've known Ms. Klein, what is your opinion of her?
Reagan is the type of person who would risk her own safety in order to prevent from others from getting injured.
Objection, Your Honor. There is a lack of foundation as to how the witness can testify to that.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
The Ms. Kloss has known Ms. Klein for 6 years. She built relationships, and I'm about to lay foundation as to an example of Ms. Kloss testifying to Ms. Klein risking her safety.
The objection's overruled. You may answer.
Can you please provide the court with an example of Ms. Klein risking her safety?
Well, one time, a hot plate was going to fall onto a baby sitting in a high chair, but Reagan dashed to catch the hot plate with her bare hands. Reagan got really hurt, but she saved the baby.
Objection, Your Honor. Inadmissible character evidence.
May I be heard, Your Honor? The defense is allowed to offer the defendant's own good character, and this completely contradicts the 2 count that my client is being charged with, and this is foundation for her opinion.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
The inadmissible character evidence is only admissible when it shows that the defendant's character is inconsistent with the acts of which she is being accused. The fact that Ms. Klein physically caught a hot plate before it hit a baby does not show that the defendant would not electronically threaten or swat someone whom she might hate.
Well, I disagree. The objection's overruled. The answer will remain.
Did you finish your answer, Ms. Kloss?
I believe I did, yes.
Now, does Ms. Klein lying about breaking your oven seem consistent with your interactions with Reagan in the past?
No, Reagan has never done anything like that in the past. Reagan has a heart of gold and she understands the value of life.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Kloss.
Good morning.
The defendant was your employee, correct?
Yes, she was.
But in the last couple of years, the defendant only worked for you during her breaks from college, meaning summer and the holidays, correct?
Correct, yes.
So for the majority of those years, you never saw the defendant, did you?
No, but we gained more personal knowledge for over 6 years.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes.
Now, the defendant broke your oven, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And you didn't find out about this until more than 6 months had passed, correct?
No, until Sawyer came up to me and told me.
So after finding this out, you were so furious that you decided to fire the defendant, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
In fact, you even said that you would sue the defendant for your $34,000 oven, correct?
I said that out of anger, but yes, I said that.
And after saying this, you saw the defendant look directly at Miss Smith, didn't you?
Yes, she did.
Now, Ms. Kloss, you testified that you saw a news story with Reagan and the other employees, didn't you?
Yes, correct, we did.
And the news story was about a kid who prank called the SWAT, correct?
Correct, unfortunately, yes.
As a result, a person's father got shot, correct?
Yes, unfortunately.
So after watching this news story, you said that you did talk with the defendant and the other employees about how reckless it was to falsely call the SWAT on someone, correct?
Yes, we all did.
And how easily someone could get hurt from that?
Correct, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Ms. Kloss, for this discussion that you had about how reckless the swatting somebody was Cameron Holmes present for that discussion?
Yes, she was.
And about your $34,000 oven, were you ever actually going to sue Reagan for this?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
The relevance for Ms. Kloss not actually suing Ms. Klein just completely contradicts Ms. Klein's motive for swatting Sawyer.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
This testimony is irrelevant because at the time, the defendant was not aware that she was not actually going to sue her.
Objection sustained.
Now, Ms. Kloss, Cameron Holmes was also present for the swatting incident about the kid shooting his father. Is that correct?
Yes, she was.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Defense, you may call your next witness.
The defense calls Marlo Patterson.
Marlo Patterson, please approach the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Marlo Patterson, spelled Patterson.
Your Honor, before I proceed, may I rearrange the exhibits?
Yes.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Patterson.
Good morning.
Would you please briefly introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Marlo Patterson. I am 23 years old. I just finished my junior year at the University of California, and I work at Hennessy's restaurant during the summer.
How would you describe your relationship with Ms. Klein?
We are friends, but we've become closer as we attend college together and work at Hennessy's restaurant.
And how would you describe your relationship with Ms. Smith?
She's a coworker, but once her social media went viral, she acted quite annoying and acted like she was better than us.
And how, if at all, did you react to Ms. Smith becoming annoying?
Well, Reagan, Cameron, and I decided to catfish Miss Smith.
Why did you catfish Ms. Smith?
Well, we dealt with her obsession with social media for about a month, and we decided we'd had enough. We just wanted to knock her down a few pegs. We never meant to hurt her. We were just messing around with her.
Now moving on, Mr. Patterson, what were you doing on the night of August 14th?
Well, after Reagan got fired, we went back to her apartment.
And what, if anything, did you do when you first got to her apartment?
Well, Reagan told us about everything and how she commented on Sawyer's post.
And did Ms. Smith react in any way to this comment that you're aware of?
Yes, she responded with LOL as if you're done now, bye.
Now, Mr. Patterson, what were you doing about 9 o'clock on August 14th?
I was on the phone with my sister when I got a notification from my Yum Yum delivery that the pizza was arriving, so I sent Cameron down to get it.
Your Honor, may the witness approach the exhibits?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit B. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, it's a screenshot of my Yum Yum delivery order history.
And is it a true and accurate representation of this screenshot?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the defense moves to admit Exhibit B into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit B?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit B is received in evidence.
And Mr. Patterson, what time does Exhibit B state that the pizza arrived?
9:02.
And then, Mr. Patterson, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit E. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, it's a diagram of Reagan's apartment.
And then, Mr. Patterson, while you were on your phone call, where were you standing in Miss Klein's apartment?
I was standing right here where it says Marlo.
And where was Miss Klein sitting?
Right here where it says Reagan.
And was there anything obstructing your view of Miss Klein?
No, there wasn't.
Where was Mr. Holmes' phone, or Miss Holmes' phone?
Right here where it says phone.
And was there anything obstructing your view of the phone?
No, there wasn't.
You may be seated, Mr. Patterson. Now, while you were on the phone, did you ever notice Miss Klein using Miss Holmes' phone?
No, I did not.
And did you notice anyone on Miss Holmes' phone?
Yes, I saw Cameron checking her phone quite regularly through the night.
How would you describe your relationship with Cameron Holmes?
Well, we've been drifting apart, and she went to say about Reagan that the summer would be a whole lot better if she could just get Reagan out of the picture.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Counsel, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Patterson.
Good morning, ma'am.
You agree that the defendant used the catfishing account the most, correct?
Probably.
In fact, whose idea was it to catfish Sawyer Smith in the first place?
It was Reagan's.
Now, you and Reagan are friends, correct?
Yes, and we've come closer as we attend college together and work at
Yes,
Hennessy's
you go to
restaurant.
school together,
Yes,
and you work together, is that what you said?
yes, over the summer.
And lately, you have become even closer, haven't you?
Attending college together and working at a restaurant together, I would assume that you would get closer to anybody that you work with.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Now you're here testifying on the defendant's behalf, correct?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, more prejudicial than probative.
You want to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. This is admissible because the witness, or excuse me, this is admissible because I'm showing a bias of the witness, which is not prejudicial for the court, but for this witness.
The objection's overruled. Answer remains. Or I don't know if he's answered it yet. You can answer that question.
I believe I said yes.
Now, you believe that if Reagan had sent the text to Tip, she would have talked to you about it first, is that right?
I assume so.
You say that in your statement, don't you?
Yes.
You say that she doesn't really do anything without talking to you first, correct?
Yes, sending in the post. She doesn't do anything without running it by me first.
Except for the post, meaning the comment that she posted on Sawyer's post on August 14th?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, on the night of August 14th, you never saw the defendant with Cameron's phone?
Yes, that's correct.
So you did not see the defendant check the time on Cameron's phone?
No, I did not.
And when you sent Cameron downstairs to get the pizza, the only person upstairs near Reagan and the phone was you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But you were on your phone talking to your sister, is that right?
Yes, it is.
You didn't even notice when exactly Cameron came back into the apartment, correct?
Well, I noticed when she came back up, but I couldn't tell you the time.
Right, so you didn't notice when exactly she came back into the apartment, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You even say that you were a little off in outer space during the phone call, don't you?
Yes, a little.
Meaning you weren't paying full attention to what was going on around you during the phone call?
Not full attention, but I would
Is
notice.
that a yes to my question?
Yes,
And that phone call was the phone call was almost 20 minutes, wasn't it?
yes, I believe it started at 8:57 and ended at 9:14.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Actually,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson, despite the fact that you were a little off in outer space, would you have noticed that Ms. Klein was on the phone for more than a few minutes?
Yes, of course, I would have noticed if anybody was around the phone for more than a few minutes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. May this witness be excused?
Yes, you may step down, and the defense may call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Reagan Klein to stand.
Reagan Klein, please approach the witness stand. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? I do. You may be seated. Please state your first and last name and spell your last name for the record.
Reagan Klein, K-L-E-I-N.
Before I proceed, may I inquire as to the time remaining?
Defense has 4 minutes and 32 seconds.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Ms. Klein.
Good morning.
Will you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Reagan Klein. I am 22 years old, and I am currently attending the University of California.
And what do you do for a living?
Although I am a student, I also have 2 jobs on campus, and I've worked at Hennessy's for the last 6 years.
Do you know any of your coworkers at Hennessy's?
Yes, I do.
Please state their names for the court.
Cameron Holmes, Marlo Patterson, and Sawyer Smith.
And what is your relationship to Sawyer Smith?
She and I have been best friends for the last 8 years, although we've been drifting apart recently.
And why is that?
A recent NowPick post of Sawyer's went viral, and as a result, she was offered a brand deal. She soon decided that I was not befitting to her brand, I suppose.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Ms. Klein. What was your response to this change?
I was devastated. We'd been best friends for 8 years, and suddenly we were strangers. I was heartbroken.
Ms. Klein, you're being accused of having made a criminal threat to Ms. Smith based on the NowPick comment you left on her photo. Why did you make this comment?
It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. I never meant it.
Did you mean to physically harm Ms. Smith?
Absolutely not.
Did you ever want to threaten Ms. Smith?
Never.
Then why did you make this comment?
I simply made it as a way of showing Sawyer that she really had hurt my feelings.
So, Ms. Klein, you're also being accused of having made a false report of emergency to the police, resulting in a swatting incident at Ms. Smith's residence. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And do you know what swatting is?
Yes, I do.
And what are your feelings towards swatting?
I am absolutely appalled that anyone would ever do that.
Ms. Klein, switching gears at the moment to the night of August 14th at your apartment, what were you doing at around 9 o'clock p.m.?
I was sitting at my dining room table, waiting for Cameron to come back upstairs with the pizza that Marlo had ordered.
And where was Cameron Holmes' phone, the one that set the text tip at this time?
Charging near my dining room table.
So when did Miss Holmes get back from getting the pizza?
5 minutes later.
And did she do anything when she came back?
Yes, she set the pizza on the table and then she checked her phone.
Miss Klein, have you ever been angry enough to threaten Miss Smith?
In all 8 years, not once.
Miss Klein, did you send in the false text tip to the police?
Absolutely not, and I never would.
Thank you, Miss Klein. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Miss Klein.
Good morning.
Sawyer Smith was your best friend, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
But then she dropped you as a friend, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
You even say she treated you like you were worth nothing, correct?
Yes, she did.
And then Sawyer even told your darkest secret, didn't she?
She did.
The secret that you had broken your boss's $34,000 oven?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you had lied about this for over 6 months?
Only because Sawyer told me to.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes.
Now, you were fired from your job because Sawyer had told the secret, correct?
Yes, I was.
And, Miss Klein, you're a college student, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
You're even working 2 jobs on campus?
Yes.
You have loans to pay, don't you?
I do.
In fact, you're barely keeping up, aren't you?
Unfortunately.
And now, not only had you lost your job, but you believed you would be sued for $34,000, correct?
Yes.
And Sawyer knew about your loans being your best friend for 8 years, didn't she?
She did.
And she still gloated on social media to thousands of people about setting you up for a $34,000 lawsuit?
I'm still shocked, but yes, she did.
You commented on that social media post. You deserve to die. I'm going to get you for this, you just wait, correct?
I didn't mean it, but yes, I did, and I regret it.
And didn't your comment also say, I hate you? When you're dead, no one will even miss you, you monstrous slime of a person?
Again, I never meant it, and I regret it, but yes, I did.
Thank you. And didn't your comment also say you think you can stick me with a $34,000 lawsuit and just get away with it?
Yes.
And Miss Klein, didn't you tell Sawyer Smith to watch her back? You were coming for her?
I commented that, yes.
Yes, you commented it on her social media post so that she would see it?
Again, I regret it, but yes.
Now, that night you were at your apartment with Cameron Holmes and Marlo Patterson, is that right?
Yes.
You're aware that the false tip was sent from Cameron's flip phone at 9:08 p.m., correct?
Yes.
You stated that Cameron probably sent the text tip?
Yes, I did.
You also stated that when she went downstairs to get the pizza at 9 o'clock, she came back upstairs only about 5 minutes later, is that right?
Yes, she did.
So around what time would this be?
About 9:05.
And the only time you mentioned seeing Cameron check her phone was at this point, while she was still holding the pizza, correct?
Correct.
And 3 minutes later, if it was 9:05, the text tip was sent, correct?
Yes.
From the number keypad of a flip phone?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the exhibits?
Yes.
Now, Miss Klein, before Cameron went downstairs to get the pizza, you, Marlo, and Cameron were all watching TV, correct?
Correct.
And the flip phone was plugged into the wall, charging over here?
Yes.
Now, Miss Klein, just to be clear, what day were you fired?
I was fired that day.
And what date was that?
I believe it was August 14th.
And what day did you comment on Sawyer's social media post?
That same day. It had been a pretty bad day.
And what day was Sawyer swatted?
That same day.
So all of these things happened on the same day, August 14th?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Miss Klein, why did you put the slide on the oven?
I asked Sawyer about it, and she told me to do so. It was torturing me on the inside.
And Miss Klein, even though you said these words in the comic, did you mean any of it?
Absolutely not.
And lastly, Miss Klein, why do you think Cameron Holmes was the one who sent the tip?
I hadn't touched the phone all night except to check the time at 9:11, and I didn't even know that the tip was sent until Officer Lopez had told me about it.
Thank you, Miss Klein. No further questions, Your Honor. May the witness be seated?
Thank you. Ms. Klein, you may step down. Any other evidence on behalf of the defense?
No, Your Honor, defense rests.
All right. The prosecution then has the burden of proof, so they get to do their closing argument first. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Before I begin, may I inquire as to how much time is left for closing argument?
Yes.
Prosecution has 5 minutes and 45 seconds.
May I also rearrange the exhibits and have permission to approach them?
Yes.
May I proceed? Your Honor, revenge begins with betrayal. Clearly, Sawyer Smith is not entirely blameless. She betrayed her best friend, ending their 8-year friendship and later getting that same friend fired. But unlike this friend, she did not break the law. At the beginning of this trial, my colleagues and I set out to prove that the defendant, Reagan Klein, is guilty of criminal threat and false report of emergency. And we have. First, count 2, criminal threat. The defendant's comment on Sawyer Smith's post said, "You deserve to die. I'm going to get you for this. You just wait. I hate you. When you're dead, no one will even miss you, you monstrous slime of a person. You think you can stick me with a $34,000 lawsuit and just get away with it? Watch your back, Sawyer. I'm coming for you." A statement that clearly indicates a serious intention and the immediate prospect of harming the person. And yet the prosecution must only prove that this statement was meant as a threat, even if the defendant did not mean to actually carry it out. Devastated from being betrayed and distraught from the prospect of being sued for $34,000, the defendant, Reagan Klein, burdened with student loans, did indeed willfully threaten to take revenge on Miss Smith because she was angry and desperate. And after reading this threat, Miss Smith was in a sustained state of fear. Knowing not only what the defendant did to her, but also what she had done to provoke the defendant, Miss Smith had good reason to be, and was, terrified. Second, count 1, false report of emergency, has 4 elements. The prosecution must prove that the defendant, 1, reported to the authorities that an emergency exists, 2, knew that the report was false, 3, knew that the response to the report would likely cause great harm, and 4, that great harm was sustained by someone due to the defendant's false report. It is undisputed that great harm was sustained by Miss Smith in breaking her finger, and that whoever made the report knew that it was false. The questions we must answer today are, did Reagan Klein make the false report, and if so, did she understand that doing so could cause great harm? The prosecution has proven today that the answer to both of these questions is a definitive yes. There is only one person with enough motive to swat Miss Smith, Reagan Klein. Miss Smith ended their 8-year friendship for her social media status, got the defendant fired from her job and nearly sued for $34,000, knowing that the defendant struggled with loans, and then publicly gloated over doing this. Your Honor, it is no coincidence that on the same day the defendant, who had been defaming Miss Smith for weeks, was fired, she threatened Miss Smith, and that same night, Miss Smith was swatted. Now, Cameron Holmes has testified to the defendant's means and opportunity. The
The text tip was sent from Miss Holmes' flip phone at 9:08 p.m. But Miss Holmes is downstairs picking up the pizza at 9:08 p.m., leaving only 2 people upstairs with her flip phone when the text tip was sent, Reagan Klein and Marlo Patterson. But Marlo Patterson was occupied with the phone call. This leaves one person who had both the means and the opportunity, Reagan Klein. And sure enough, when Miss Holmes came back upstairs, she saw the defendant closing the phone. And yet the defendant claims that she looked at the phone to only check the time and denied any knowledge of the tip. But Officer Lopez has given a testimony that directly contradicts the defendant's claim. When Officer Lopez looked at the flip phone screen, she immediately found that the screen was still on the text tip sent at 9:08. If Reagan Klein really did check the time at 9:11, she must have seen the tip. So why would she lie? The answer can only be that the defendant herself sent that text tip. Furthermore, in Dr. Dakota Chung's expert opinion, the author of the text tip is Reagan Klein. Both Dr. Dakota Chung and the defense's Dr. Blake Williams concluded that the features of the text tip are the most distinctive of Reagan Klein. The defense's Sam Kloss even confirmed that from a news story, the defendant undoubtedly understood the potential harm that swatting could cause. Your Honor, the defendant Reagan Klein is the only person with the means, motive, and opportunity, and is further indicated by expert analysis to be the author of the text tip. However, the defense would have you believe that Reagan Klein is not the only person, that Cameron Holmes is even a more likely culprit than the defendant. The defendant who claims that Ms. Holmes wasn't actually downstairs for 10 minutes, but came back around 9:05. But Your Honor, considering the amount of time and difficulty it would take to type out all 400 characters on the number keypad of a flip phone while holding the pizza, and the fact that Ms. Holmes would have to think of the entire message, make sure there are no misspellings, and imitate the defendant's writing style, as Dr. Blake Williams alluded to, all in the span of a few minutes to send a tip at 9:08, makes the defense's story not only unreasonable, but impossible. The court has been provided with the defendant's means, Cameron Holmes' unattended phone, her motive, revenge on the friend who betrayed her, and her opportunity,
30 seconds.
Marlo Patterson's phone call, and Cameron Holmes' absence. Your Honor, for these reasons, the only verdict beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant, Reagan Klein, is guilty of criminal threat and false report of emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, you have an opportunity to give your closing argument. You may begin.
Before I proceed, may I rearrange the exhibits?
Yes.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll just start by stating the obvious. This case is a farce. In reality, this case shouldn't even come to trial. But the difference between reality and the distorted reality presented by the prosecution tonight is that while Ms. Klein's actions might have been mean, rude, hurtful, and maybe even a bit vindictive, they were not criminal. Your Honor, addressing count 2 first, to convict my client of making a criminal threat, the prosecution has to have proven 6 separate elements. I'm going to focus on the ones that they were furthest from proving. Along with the 5 other elements, today the prosecution had to prove that when Ms. Klein commented on Sawyer Smith's post, that she intended her comment to be understood as a threat. Your Honor, today you heard testimony from Marlo Patterson, who stated that the group of friends was just messing with Ms. Smith, and that they would never actually want to hurt her. You also heard from my client herself, who testified that in no way did she really mean for her comment to be understood as a threat. Your Honor, she had just been fired with a $34,000 lawsuit, and in the heat of the moment, with all of her emotions clouding her judgment, she commented something mean and regretted it. In no way did she truly mean for her comment to be understood as a threat, and the prosecution has failed to prove otherwise beyond a reasonable doubt. And Your Honor, tonight the prosecution argued that Ms. Klein, she didn't post anything without Marlo Patterson looking over it. But Your Honor, this was a heat of the moment decision. She wasn't looking back. She was upset and hurt. She commented this and regretted it, Your Honor. Tonight, the prosecution also had to prove that after reading Ms. Klein's comment, Ms. Smith was in sustained fear. And Your Honor, Ms. Smith testified that she was afraid. But Ms. Smith replied to Ms. Klein's comment laughed out loud as if "you're done now, Bob." And while she claimed that she was trying to keep up her image for her followers, Your Honor, if you look at her actions, she went back home alone and lay in bed watching a movie. And she didn't contact the police. And she claimed that she was trying to keep up her image for her followers, Your Honor, but her followers wouldn't have known if she contacted the police. And even if you believe that Miss Smith was afraid, she told Officer Lopez that she was, that was after the fact, Your Honor. That was after she fell down the stairs, after the SWAT team kicked in her door, after she broke the largest, strongest bone in her body. Your Honor, any reasonable person would have been afraid at that point. But count 2 requires that Miss Smith was in sustained fear because of Miss Klein's comment. And the prosecution has failed to prove that fact beyond a reasonable doubt. As for count 1, Your Honor, the prosecution has to have proven another 5 separate elements. But 4 of the elements don't even matter because the prosecution failed to prove the most important one, that Miss Klein actually sent a text to tip. Your Honor, on the night of August 14th, there were 3 people in Miss Klein's apartment. At around the time that the text to tip was sent, Miss Klein was sitting down at the upstairs table. Marlo Patterson was on the phone with his sister, and Karen Holmes was on her phone. Your Honor, at about 9 p.m., Karen Holmes went downstairs to pick up the pizza, and as Miss Klein testified, she came back up no more than 5 minutes later. At that point, she checked her phone, Your Honor. Your Honor, tonight the prosecution argued that Miss Klein would have seen the text to tip if it was there. But Your Honor, Miss Klein testified that after she was done on the phone, Miss Klein checked the phone. Or excuse me, Miss Holmes checked the phone. Your Honor, Miss Holmes would have been the last one to see the text to tip. And Your Honor, tonight you heard from Marlo Patterson that Miss Holmes had grown jealous of my client and even said that the summer would have been a lot more fun if they could just get her out of the picture. Miss Holmes also testified that Miss Smith deserved to be humiliated by the catfishing. And Your Honor, who uses the word deserve the most? Tonight in testimony, it was Cameron Holmes. Your Honor, in the writings, it was Cameron Holmes. And even in the text to tip, Your Honor, the word deserve. And Your Honor, while it is the defense's position that Cameron Holmes did most likely send a text to tip, whether you believe that or not doesn't matter, because the prosecution failed to prove that it was Miss Klein beyond a reasonable doubt. Tonight, the prosecution also argued that Miss Klein would have obtained the idea of swatting from the news program that she watched with Miss Kloss. But Your Honor, there were 3 people who saw that program. Your Honor, Cameron Holmes and Marlo Patterson were also present. There were 3 people who saw that program. There were 3 people in Miss Klein's apartment when the text to tip was sent. Yet only one person's interview was actually given any merit by Officer Lopez. That was Cameron Holmes, Your Honor, the person who owned the phone and had the most opportunity and motive to send the text to tip. Your Honor, if this is not enough evidence, tonight you heard testimony from expert witness Dr. Blake Williams, who testified that in her expert opinion, it was most likely Cameron Holmes who sent the text to tip, trying to disguise her writing to appear as if it were my client's. And furthermore, Your Honor, Sawyer Smith testified that Miss Klein never posted on her social media. And the writing analysis took place based on social media posts, Your Honor. Therefore, the only social media posts that the doctors analyzed were the posts from the catfish account, Your Honor, where both Miss Klein, Marlo Patterson, and Cameron Holmes contributed. And Your Honor, Dr. Chung failed to analyze writing samples from more than 2 people, completely disregarding the fact that it could have been anyone other than Miss Klein or Cameron Holmes, such as Marlo Patterson, for example. Your Honor, if there are 2 or more reasonable interpretations of a piece of circumstantial evidence, one pointing towards guilt and one to innocence, the trier of fact is required to accept the interpretation that points to Miss Klein's innocence. For example, both expert witnesses analyzed the same data and arrived at 2 separate conclusions. Therefore, the conclusion that Miss Klein was not the author of the tip must be accepted. Your Honor, based on this, and the fact that the prosecution has failed to meet their burden of proof, and proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Klein is guilty, the defense respectfully requests a verdict of not guilty on both counts.
Thank you, counsel. Rebuttal argument from the people.
Yes, Your Honor. As for criminal threat, Ms. Smith only responded the way she did to protect her social media status, which to her was her life. Furthermore, Your Honor, a person does not have to call the police to be afraid. And as for false report of emergency, the defense brought up
or alluded to Calcum 224, that states when there are more than one reasonable conclusion from the evidence, we must take the one that points to innocence. For Your Honor, today we only have one. Even if Cameron Holmes had the motive, it was physically impossible for her to have the opportunity. The defense tried to allude to the fact that Ms. Holmes could have written the tip before going downstairs, but Your Honor, before going downstairs, all three friends were preoccupied with watching TV while the phone was plugged into the wall. And the defense has failed to explain why Ms. Holmes would not take the opportunity of being sent downstairs to privately send the tip, and instead left her phone upstairs in the open where both Marlo and Reagan could easily check it. Your Honor, for these reasons, the people ask that you find the defendant guilty of criminal theft and false report of emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. And defense rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
The prosecution argued that Cameron Holmes wouldn't have had the opportunity to send a text to him. But Your Honor, even though it was 400 characters and it was typed out on a numerical keypad on a flip phone, Your Honor, Cameron Holmes, as you heard Marlo Patterson testify, Cameron Holmes was on her phone throughout the night, and she would have had the opportunity to type that text-to-tip out in bits and pieces. And furthermore, Your Honor, the prosecution stated that the text-to-tip was received at 9:08, meaning that when Cameron came back up the stairs, after 5 minutes, she could have sent that text-to-tip that she had written out throughout the duration of the night. And that is reasonable doubt right there. Based on this and the fact that the prosecution has failed to prove that it was Ms. Klein beyond a reasonable doubt, again, the defense respectfully requests a verdict not guilty on both counts.
Thank you, counsel. All right, before I announce the verdict, students may confer with their attorney or teacher coach regarding any trial irregularities. Please note that this time should be used to raise substantial rule violations only and should not be used to argue additional points of law or rebut opponents' arguments. Arguing for hyper-technical interpretations of the rules, especially when designed to embarrass others or to gain an unfair advantage, is prohibited. You have 30 seconds to confer. Please do so now. Does anyone want to report any irregularities?
None for the people, Your Honor.